I've been somewhat concerned and not as enthusiastic as other people are about Tong's long-term prospects. I worry about two things. One is injury, which I'll explain in a moment. The second of which is avoiding injury, which will make him significantly less effective from this point of view. And the third really is the inability or the difficulty of creating pitches with horizontal motion, which you need, otherwise you're just pitching in one plane, the vertical plane. You need to be pitching in the horizontal plane as well, and the best of all pitches are ones that involve both the vertical plane and the horizontal plane. Okay, so what's the problem with regard to injury? The problem with regard to injury comes from the side bend. As you side bend, you bend your spine. Your spine is going like this. It's being bent, right, to accommodate the bend. You see, it's up here, down there, it's bent, not a straight line. Tilting, in contrast, will allow you to get out of balance, but it will keep your spine relatively straight. So some people prefer tilting, like in the golf swing called stack and tilt. The tilt keeps the spine relatively straight. All right, so that's the injury worry. The worry about the injury is that over a course of time, you'll either hurt your spine because it's not supposed to bend other than in certain spots in the spine. If the lower part of the spine bends, that's a real problem. That's how people end up with lower back problems, because the lower part of the spine, the lumbar, is designed for stability, not for bending. It is the foundation on which the rest of the spine relies. If it bends, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have a problem. Now, the spine and the brain work together in the following way. As the brain works with every part of your body, it doesn't want to see you in pain. And so ultimately, it will force you to make changes to reduce the extent of your reliance on something that cannot handle as much pressure with as much speed as often as it's called upon to do. And that will mean it will reduce the extent of your side bend to keep you safe. And as you reduce the extent of your side bend, in an effort to keep you safe and avoid injury, your angle changes and your pitches don't perform the way they were intended to. They move differently because they're thrown from a different angle. And in addition, they are less deceptive, much more familiar, because as this angle comes down, it's much closer to what batters are used to seeing, when they're not used to seeing this at all. And you'll recall, in the case of Lincecum, what happened to him was when he ceased to be effective, he fell off the earth. He ceased to be able to pitch convincingly at a major league level. So my worry is, I wouldn't change Tong. This is how he pitches. But I would be very careful to make sure he's bending in a spot in the spine that can absorb some degree of punishment and bend, but not too much. Another downside of this has to do with the capacity to use the kinematic sequence, because you rotate most effectively when your hips are relatively level, your pelvis is relatively level, and your spine is relatively perpendicular to your pelvis. Once your spine bends, as it does in golf, when you make a right lateral bend in the downswing, it makes rotation more difficult. just watch this. I'm going to do it in the Tong way. It is hard to rotate significantly. There's very little go this way and very little to go this way. If you think of it the golf way, if you side bend at the start of your downswing, look how truncated the rotation is. So you don't have an efficient mechanism for getting the energy that you recruited from the ground through your pelvis into your shoulders. That means you're going to be an arm thrower more than you'd want to be. You put more pressure on throwing with your arm, slinging the ball with your upper body, of initiating this motion more from up here. And if you noticed in Tong, there are times you see pictures of him in which his hips and shoulders seem to be facing the target at the same time. In other words, his shoulders have caught up to his hip rotation very quickly. He hasn't had, let's call it, the stretch that would look like this, the way Nolan McLean looks, with a lot of his jersey still indicating his upper body is back and his hips, pelvis have rotated. That's a much more efficient mechanism for transferring energy and pitching, as we've already seen. And so he's losing out some of his capacity to recruit energy, relying more on arm speed, generated from the upper part of his body, and less on recruiting the energy through the kinematic sequence. So those are the two issues: injury and the inability to effectively use the kinematic sequence.